Hi, my name is Joanna Whitney. I am an intuitive artist and a student of natural law, and I'm going through the consensus book, and I'm on page 12 right now, and I'm going to reread the last paragraph of 2.1, the structure of formal consensus, because I realized something interesting about it last time. It says each level has a different scope and focus. At the first level, the scope is broad, allowing the discussion to consider the philosophical and political implications, as well as the general merits and drawbacks and other relevant information. The only focus is on the proposal as a whole. Some decisions can be reached after discussion at the first level. At the second level, the scope of the discussion is limited to concerns. They are identified and publicly listed, which enables everyone to get an overall picture of the concerns. The focus of attention is on identifying the body of concerns and grouping similar ones. At the third level, the scope is very narrow. The focus of discussion is limited to a single unresolved concern until it is resolved. So what I realized was that this is based on the Trivium. The Trivium is an old method of learning using grammar, logic, and rhetoric being the ultimate completion of the Trivium. The modern interpretation of the Trivium would be input, process, and output. And this is exactly what formal consensus is doing. It's gathering the information together in the first level, it's processing it in the second level, and then it's narrowing the focus, coming to the output in the third level. So that just proves that it works because it's based on ancient knowledge, the way that we used to learn before we, back in maybe Greek and Roman times, they used the trivium and the quadrivium as well, before the Prussian education of dumbing people down became popular. Okay, 2.2, the flow of formal consensus. In an ideal situation, every proposal would be submitted in writing and briefly introduced the first time it appears on the agenda. At the next meeting, after everyone has had enough time to read it and carefully consider any concerns, the discussion would begin in earnest. Okay, so this is important because most people don't read now. I've noticed, I've heard, most people don't read. Okay, I personally am a person who prefers not to read now, but I know that that is part of the dumbing down and mind control, so I force myself to read. I think it has something to do with dumb phones, smartphones, EMFs, and things like that. I force myself to read. I really enjoy reading certain things, but I will skim, and I literally have to pray to God for my mind to be open so that I can focus on subjects I don't want to read, which would be like this kind of subject. I wouldn't want to read it. I would wait till the last minute, right? And then read it, but that's not what it's saying here. It's saying that at the next meeting, after everyone has had time to read it and carefully consider any concerns. So we would have to read. We would have to maybe read it more than once and consider the concerns of this proposal. Then the discussion would begin in earnest. Often it would not be until the third meeting that a decision is made. Of course, this depends upon how many proposals are on the table and the urgency of the decision. I think I did bring this up in the last video because I said that these days, the same people are not going to show up to all three meetings, and you just have to go with whoever shows up. I can encourage everyone to show up, but that doesn't mean they're gonna show up. Clarify the process. This is page 13. The facilitator introduces the person presenting the proposal and gives a short update on any previous action on it. It is very important for the facilitator to explain the process which brought this proposal to the meeting and to describe the process that will be followed to move the group through the proposal to consensus. It is the facilitator's job to make sure that every participant clearly understands the structure and the discussion techniques being employed while the meeting is in progress. So obviously the facilitator has specific requirements of the job. They have to be someone who can comprehend, read and comprehend what they're reading and then verbalize it to everyone. And they're also a neutral party, I believe. And they also must discuss the process with the people presenting it. So this is not something that you just, email and then don't talk to people about. I'm sure that this was made presuming that people would see each other in between or talk on the phone about. Present proposal or issue. When possible and appropriate, proposals ought to be prepared in writing and distributed well in advance of the meeting in which a decision is required. This encourages prior discussion and consideration, helps the presenter anticipate concerns, minimize surprises, and involves everyone in creating the proposal. If the necessary groundwork has not been done, the wisest choice might be to send the proposal to a committee. Proposal writing is difficult to accomplish in a large group. The committee would develop the proposal for consideration at a later time. The presenter reads the written proposal aloud, provides background information, and states clearly its benefits and reasons for adoption, including addressing any existing concerns. So these days, all this would be done on email and Zoom, which is unfortunately not going to help things along. I would say you could maybe prepare things in writing and distribute them by email in advance of the meeting. But I would say there should be a pre-meeting if it's all done on email, because this book was written before the internet, and so people actually met with each other and talked about things. It encourages prior discussion and consideration, helps the presenter anticipate concerns, minimizes surprises, and involves everyone in creating the proposal. Everyone in creating the proposal. So maybe there's 4 meetings, one where you develop the proposal. I understand that everybody's super busy right now and it's very hard to get together, believe me, because I'm involved in quite a few different projects and it's always difficult to get together. But this is how it used to be in the old days. We used to get together. Maybe we didn't live like, an hour away from each other the way that maybe that's what's going on now, but this is just the way it is. Questions which clarify the presentation. Questions are strictly limited by the facilitator to those which seek greater comprehension of the proposal as presented. Everyone deserves the opportunity to fully understand what is being asked of the group before discussion begins. This is not a time for comments or concerns. If there are only a few questions, they can be answered one at a time by the person presenting the proposal. If there are many, a useful technique is hearing all the questions first, then answering them together. After answering all clarifying questions, the group begins discussion. So rather than answering one question after another, which would produce new questions, you would put all the questions together and answer them all together. So then the questions that would come up as a result of the questions being answered would be different than nitpicking and hours of nitpicky questions that would result as a result of each question being answered one by one. Level 1, broad open discussion, general discussion. Discussion at this level ought to be the broadest in scope. Try to encourage comments which take the whole proposal into account, i.e., why it is a good idea or general problems which need to be addressed. Discussion at this level often has a philosophical or principled tone, purposely addressing how this proposal might affect the group in the long run or what kind of precedent it might create, etc. So this would be a place where you would look at the group principles and see if the proposal was in alignment with the unity of purpose or in opposition to the unity of purpose of the group. And if it's in opposition, then maybe it doesn't need to be considered or it needs to be adjusted so that it's in alignment. I've seen so many situations where topics have been brought up that had absolutely nothing to do with the purpose of the group, so shouldn't even be discussed at all. They're just controversial topics that people bring up for the sake of controversy and to get attention. And that's not what this is about. And that's why you have to have a good facilitator, one who doesn't mind pissing people off, doesn't have to look good, doesn't have to be liked at every moment because they're the facilitator and they know the difference between someone trying to get attention and someone who's really serious about the unity of purpose and the proposal being presented. It helps every proposal to be discussed in this way before the group engages in resolving particular concerns. Do not allow one concern to become the focus of the discussion. When particular concerns are raised, make note of them, but encourage the discussion to move back to the proposal as a whole. Encourage the creative interplay of comments and ideas. Allow for the addition of any relevant factual information. For those who might at first feel opposed to the proposal, this discussion is consideration of what it might be good for the group in the broadest sense. Their initial concerns might, in fact, be of general concern to the whole group. And for those who initially support the proposal, this is a time to think about the proposal broadly and some of the general problems. If there seems to be general approval of the proposal, the facilitator or someone recognized to speak can request a call for consensus. While I was reading this, I was thinking, it came into my mind that it would be good to start each meeting with a prayer that encompassed the unity of purpose of the group and also hit upon the other principles of the group and its primary goals so that everyone would become focused on that. And also you would be seeking supernatural assistance from the universe, from God, from elemental spirits, from the earth combined. Since we are of the earth, we don't have to do these things by ourselves anymore. We can ask for assistance from spiritual sources. And it really does help focus the group and keep it on track if you set the tone that way. Call for consensus. The facilitator asks, are there any unresolved concerns or are there any concerns remaining? After a period of silence, if no additional concerns are raised, the facilitator declares that consensus is reached and the proposal is read for the record. The length of silence ought to be directly related to the degree of difficulty in reaching consensus. An easy decision requires a short silence. A difficult decision requires a longer silence. This encourages everyone to be at peace in accepting the consensus before moving on to other business. At this point, the facilitator assigns tasks, responsibilities, or sends the decision to a committee for implementation. It is important to note that the question is not, is there consensus, or does everyone agree? These questions do not encourage an environment in which all concerns can be expressed. If some people have a concern but are shy or intimidated by a strong showing of support for a proposal, the question, are there any unresolved concerns, speaks directly to them and provides an opportunity for them to speak. Any concerns for which someone stands aside are listed with the proposal and become a part of it. That will be explained, what that means when someone stands aside. Level 2, identify concerns. List any concerns. At the beginning of the next level, a discussion technique called brainstorming, see section 6.2.4, is used so that concerns can be identified and written down publicly by the scribe and for the record by the note taker. I'm not going to go do that now, am I? Because, I mean, look, already they're bringing in 2 more roles that we haven't discussed. I'm just going to read this right now. Be sure the scribe is as accurate as possible by checking with the person who voiced the concern before moving on. This is not a time to attempt to resolve concerns or determine their validity. That would stifle free expression of concerns. At this point, only concerns are to be expressed, reasonable or unreasonable, well thought out or vague feelings. The facilitator wants to interrupt any comments which attempt to defend the proposal, resolve the concerns, judge the value of the concerns, or in any way deny or dismiss another's feelings of doubt or concern. Sometimes simply allowing a concern to be expressed and written down helps resolve it. After most concerns have been listed, allow the group a moment to reflect on them as a whole. Aggregate related concerns. At this point, the focus is on identifying patterns and relationships between concerns. This short exercise must not be allowed to focus upon or resolve any particular concern. So, this is going to require discipline and focus and understanding that it's a process, not a destination. And I think a lot of us, myself included, we've been mind controlled into trying to get this done in an hour. We have to get it done right now. That's not how this works at all. And the process of this will create a unity and trust in the group. I was also thinking, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, that the people who used to use this were also the Rainbow Gathering. The Rainbow Gathering people use consensus to make decisions like about where they're going to go next, or if they need to add another kitchen, or what's going on with the drug addicts and the alcoholics and the crazy situation with the police and, the big party out that happens around the Rainbow Gathering. So they definitely use formal consensus, or they did used to use it. And you can look on their website. I think it's called, I can't remember. It's called something like We Are Home or something like that, .org. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's on there. Aggregate related concerns. Did I read that? Oh, I did. Level 3, resolve concerns. Resolve groups of related concerns. Often related concerns can be resolved as a group. Call for consensus. If most of the concerns seem to have been resolved, call for consensus in the manner described earlier. If some concerns have not been resolved at this time, then a more focused discussion is needed. Restate remaining concerns one at a time. Return to the list. The facilitator checks each one with the group and removes ones which have been resolved or are, for any reason, no longer of concern. Each remaining concern is restated clearly and concisely and addressed one at a time. Sometimes new concerns are raised which need to be added to the list. Every individual is responsible for honestly expressing concerns as they think of them. It is not appropriate to hold back a concern and spring it upon the group late in the process. This undermines trust and limits the group's ability to adequately discuss the concern in its relation to other concerns. Yes, I've been involved in a group that does that. It springs complicated concerns on the group at the end of the process when everybody's tired, and that's a way that they push through things that are in violation of their principles. And I think it was originally initiated to make sure that there was that the minority had a voice, but unfortunately it's been misused by people that don't want a full-on discussion and they just want to push through their idea. It's very unfortunate. Questions which clarify the concern. The facilitator asks for any questions or comments which would further clarify the concern so everyone clearly understands it before discussion starts. Discussion limited to resolving one concern. Use as many creative group discussion techniques as needed to facilitate a resolution for each concern. Keep the discussion focused upon the particular concern until every suggestion has been offered. If no new ideas are coming forward and the concern cannot be resolved, or if the time allotted for this item has been entirely used, move to one of the closing options described below. Call for consensus. Repeat this process until all concerns have been resolved. At this point, the group should be at consensus, but it would be appropriate to call for consensus anyway, just to be sure no concern has been overlooked. Closing options, send to committee. If a decision on the proposal can wait until the whole group meets again, then send the proposal to a committee, which can clarify the concerns and bring new creative resolutions for consideration by the group. It is a good idea to include on the committee representatives of representatives of all the major concerns, as well as those most supportive of the proposal, so they can work out solutions in a less formal setting. Sometimes, if the decision is needed before the next meeting, a smaller group can be empowered to make the decision for the larger group. But again, this committee should include all points of view. Choose this option only if absolutely necessary and the whole group consents. I don't like this idea too much right now because I don't feel like we are there yet. Like if this was a house, like if this was like a co-housing used to use formal consensus in the beginning. If everyone lived together, then they would have a time to talk about these things when they were separate, when they were not in the group, because they would live under the same roof. Like Nyland. Nyland was a co-housing place, and originally they used formal consensus to make all their decisions, but then they got lazy and they became as they are now, where they don't really talk to each other and they all are masked and jabbed. You know, the original people bought into the whole agenda and all that. So I'm not in approval of this at the moment. I don't think we're ready for it unless it's a group of people that are living together. I'm going to read this last part and stop. Stand aside. Decision adopted with unresolved concern listed. When a concern has been fully discussed and cannot be resolved, it is appropriate for the facilitator to ask those persons with this concern if they are willing to stand aside. That is, acknowledge that the concern still exists, but allow the proposal to be adopted. It is very important for the whole group to understand that this unresolved concern is then written down with the proposal in the record and in essence becomes a part of the decision. This concern can be raised again and deserves more discussion time as it has not yet been resolved. In contrast, a concern that has been resolved in past discussions does not deserve additional discussion unless something new has developed. Filibustering is not appropriate in formal consensus. I don't really know what else to say. That just shows that our government is not about consensus. It's about tyranny. I mean, it's maybe was once a republic, but now it's become a democracy, which is the precursor to socialism. And so it's all about control and pushing down the minority, whereas formal consensus is about finding, through the creative interplay of ideas, finding the center point between all of the people. And really, it's about a spiritual solution that comes as a result of people working together. Declare a block. After having spent the allotted agenda time moving through the 3 levels of discussion, trying to achieve consensus and current concerns remain, which are unresolved, the facilitator is obligated to declare that consensus cannot be reached at this meeting, that the proposal is blocked, and move on to the next agenda item. So that is the end of this particular section right now, and I'm going to stop for now until the next time. but that gives you a basic idea of how this works, and that it takes time, maybe 3 days or more, 4 days to do 4 different meetings for an exceptionally difficult decision. And, I'm going to propose that if there's a group of people that wants to try this out, we could just come up with some some proposals. People could come up with some proposals that they might think are relevant for the group that they're in, but they're not ready to raise that with their group, and they want to try it out in consensus with a group of people that are not actually going to implement the idea, just to have the experience of formal consensus. And then they could come back to their group and try out formal consensus with their proposal that they have actually worked out with another group. I think that would be really fun and educational.